Thanks for tuning in to the 3D Tutor.
Hey guys, and welcome to this part 3 of the interior tutorial for Unreal 4 engine. What we're going to be doing here is we're going to be continuing on with actually texturing one of the rooms. So what we're going to do is we're going to be starting off, well, I'm going to explain actually why this scene looks a little bit different to the last part of the tutorial. You'll notice that I'm actually missing one room, which is on this side. So if you're looking at it from the front, it's the right hand side, the kind of right reception room, whereas this one we called I believe it was the left, the reception left. Now the reason why I got rid of the right one is because it was exactly pretty much just a duplicate of the left hand side. So what's going to happen is I'm going to be texturing this, or even making a copy of it first, and then I'm going to be texturing this one room. And what that means is I don't have to unwrap that room again, because with this room, if you noticed before, and let's just go straight into there, unwrap UVW, we've still got the unwrap from before, so that's still in place, so that's all fine. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to be making a copy of this first and placing it on the other side. Now if you notice, if I zoom in on this side, I actually got rid of all of that room right the way up to the actual door frame area, so this panel just here. I didn't leave the little area of the wall thickness, because if you notice on this side, on this room, we've actually got that on or attached to this room. So when you make a copy of this, that's going to fit in very nicely to the other side. So what I'm going to do first is with this room, I need to adjust something called the pivot, which is this point just here. So right now it's in the middle of the room. I need to make that so it's on that vertex, this point just here, where it's going to attach to the other room on the other side. So we're going to go into this. We're going to be going and enabling snap toggle just up here. You can either press S on the keyboard or just click on the icon just there. We're going to right click it, and we're going to be ensuring that grid points is off, but we're going to be turning on vertex. So we're going to enable vertex and then just close that little window. After that point, when I move this object, you'll notice that it sort of snaps to vertices on the other object, but the problem is that the pivot is still not in the right place. So if we go onto the hierarchy tab, which is just here, we're then going to go and click onto affect pivot only, meaning of course it's only going to affect the pivot. We can actually move the pivot around in any position we want, and the fact that we've got the snapping to vertex turned on, it means that this pivot is going to snap to a vertex. So if we zoom in, you want to make sure you got it on exactly the right one, so it's pretty much on that point just there, where it's going to then attach to the other side of the hallway. So I'm going to deselect effect pivot only. Also, this helps because when you take it into Unreal and we basically want to snap together all these different rooms, it kind of helps because then we can just sort of snap it in exactly the same way as this. We'll snap it to that point like so, because on the other side, as we can see, there is that door frame there, and it's going to snap very nicely to that vertex. Boom. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make a copy of this room, and I'm going to switch it onto the other side. So I'm going to select this room, and then I'm going to go onto mirror, which is just up here. Now we're going to select the right axis. So X isn't the correct one. We're going to go with Y. So Y is the correct axis because it's going over onto that side. But I'm going to make sure I enable copy. So it's doing it as a copy. Also, it's just going to move the existing one over to the other side. Press OK. And then if I move that across, it should snap anyway. So you see there, it snapped. And that's it. Done. We've got 2 unwrapped rooms in little to no time. And it saved us a lot of time of having to re-unwrap that room again. Okay. You just want to make sure that when you're copying this room across, that it's not overlapping. So there's a little gap there still, so you want to make sure it doesn't overlap this wall on this side, because otherwise you'll get a really horrible glitch within the engine. So there's a clear gap there, we can see it, that there's a little gap between the wall on this room and the wall on this hallway. Alright, so we're kind of happy with that right now. Next, what we're going to do is I'm actually going to be, I think in the last video I exported the UV template from this room. So I went into Open UV Editor, went down to Tools, Render UV Template, set the size, which I believe was 2048, I think. And then now we're actually going to go in and texture it. So we're going to go into Photoshop and we're going to start applying some texture. So I'm going to open that up. This is the UV template from before. If we have a look, image size, we did set it as 2048 because we want it to be quite a high quality texture. So I'm going to go into my references folder. I've got a number of different materials that I've found. I'm going to tell you in just a moment where I got them from. I got them from textures textures.com. Now this used to be called cgtextures.com, but now it's just called textures.com. They give you 15 credits to download textures. So let's say I go into floors and I like checkerboard floors and I want to download this one just here. You can obviously preview each material as well, so this will show you it if it was tiled. Obviously you want to zoom in so you can get a really close look at this stuff, but then we can just go back, and if we like that one we can download that small version which is 1024 by 1024, and it's going to cost us 1 credit. Now this is also a seamless texture. Okay, you'll notice that when you go into the non-seamless textures you can actually download a slightly larger size, but it just means you've got a bit more work to do to ensure that that texture fits nicely in your texture sheet. So a seamless texture is always a good option. If you want to get any large or extra large, then you need to become a premium member, but you can find all that out on the website anyway. So there's loads and loads of different sections and categories to actually look for images. So you've got stuff like decals, so lots of stuff on transparent backgrounds. You'll notice that I've got a leaking texture as well, similar, I think it's that one just there. So you can actually go in and download all these things. It's really, really good, really useful. Anyway, let's go in, let's start. So my floor, one thing that I mentioned last time was you may forget which panel is for which. So the easiest way to do that is you can either name them, but I just find it easier to have it open in 3ds Max. You essentially just go to polygon and you're going to select the poly. So that poly there is on the floor, so therefore this panel on the bottom right hand side is the floor. So the easiest thing for me to do is essentially get this material. It's either this one or this one. I wasn't really too sure which one I go for, and this one was a little bit closer, but I wasn't really sure about this line, what was going on there. It looks a bit weird, so I'm just going to stick with this one, I think. Okay, I'm going to be going in and hitting Control A to select all, and then I'm going to hit Control C to copy, and then here I'm going to hit Control V just to paste it in there. Now one thing I'm not going to do here is sort of scale this down too much. The reason being is because this effect on this floor it's quite small, so the panels are already really, really small, and I don't want to have to scale this down because they're going to look pretty tiny in my room, so I'm just going to leave them at the default scale like this. Now one thing that I'm going to notice already is that I can't see the green lines of my UV space, meaning, you know, I don't know where to place this to make it fit perfectly. Of course I can kind of move it a little bit just over the edge, but I want to make sure I can see those green lines above my textures just to ensure everything fits properly. So the easiest way to do that is I can actually make a copy of the background layer. So you can right click it, go on to duplicate, or you can just drag it down to the create new layer icon and then drag that duplicate on the very top. Okay, once you've done that, you're going to go onto the drop down and you're going to click onto linear dodge. Okay, so that's just here, and as you can see now, if I move this texture around, we can still see the green lines, but it's not actually affecting the texture in any way. So I'm going to go ahead and line this up as well as I can in this bottom corner. I normally kind of go 1 pixel over the green line because it just allows me to ensure that the texture is going to fit nicely. Also, this kind of works pretty well, but on a texture like this, I want to make sure that the end of these planks just here kind of meet with the edge of the room, but by default I think that's pretty good. I might just extend it a little bit, so if I hit Control T, I might just hold Shift and scale just a touch. Now you hold Shift so that you don't have this kind of free-form movement, because then you're stretching and squishing the texture. So by holding Shift you can make sure that you're maintaining the proportions of the image. So I'd say about here is fine. Okay, it means we've got that just over there. Like I said, I'll probably do it just a little bit more. One more sort of pixel, I guess. Boom, that should be fine. So it's just kind of going over a little bit, it's not too much of a problem. We can notice here though that it's kind of missing a little bit at the end here as well. So what we can do, because we know it's a seamless texture, we're going to hold Alt, okay, and we're going to drag it across, and we're going to line it up. Now depending on your Photoshop options, if you go to if you go to View, turn on Snap, okay, make sure Snap is turned on and ticked like that. It makes it a little bit easier. If I hold Alt now and I drag this, it should snap like so. And then you can't see the seam, snap pretty perfectly, so you can see the difference there. That's the piece there, that's the piece there. It snapped perfect. Happy with that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select both of these layers by holding Control, right clicking, and going on to merge layers. So now both these layers are together, and just to clean this up a little bit, what I tend to do is I just sort of select, using the normal rectangular marquee tool, I'm just going to select the bits that are overhanging a little bit, just to clear it up a little bit. Just something like that is fine. Okay, I know there's a lot of excess here. If you want to get rid of that as well, you can do so. You can just clear it up, let's say to around about here, because we know it's not going to go any further than that, and then I can place that back where it needs to go. Just zoom in. Let's just move it across with the arrow keys. Just 1 pixel hanging over should be okay. There we go. Done. So that's the floor kind of done. I'm going to now move on to the ceiling, I guess. So we're going to go with the ceiling. So again, once again in 3ds Max, I'm going to select the ceiling poly, and that is the bottom left hand side. So now I'm going to go into Photoshop, hit Control A, copy that over, Control V. This is the ceiling just here. Now with this particular texture, what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to shrink it a little bit, because I don't want to have it so it's this big, because it's going to obviously look a little bit odd on the ceiling. So I'm going to hit Control T, and I'm going to fit this in around about here, just so it fits in nicely. I'll probably go even smaller actually, because some of these marks are a little bit large, and if they were on the environment from the bottom and you were looking up, they'd probably look a little bit big. So I'm just going to shrink those even further, possibly by about, I don't know, I don't want to go exactly half, because then the texture is going to look repeated. So I'm just going to go probably 2/3 of the way across, or 3/4 of the way across, something like this. Then I'm going to press enter. Once I've done that, I'm just going to hold Alt, I'm going to drag it up, and it should snap. Once again, this is a, well, it should be a oh god, we get my words out, a seamless texture. Now if you do this and you can see a little line cutting through, the easiest way to do that is just to make sure you're on the new layer, so this top part, you're just going to move it down by 1 pixel, and that should kind of get rid of that line to some extent anyway. Okay, so then you can't really see that line anymore, and then going to hold Alt again, go across, and again we can see that line, so I'm just going to move it across 1. That's done the job. And here, move it across, and actually move it up as well, because it doesn't look like that was lining up very well for some reason. Let's have a look. Let's see if we can get this. That's perfect there. I think it's the top one just here, it needs to be down by 1 pixel. As you can see, that layer wasn't quite lined up as well as it should be. Okay, so that's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, so once I've done with that, I'm just going to then hold Control and select all 4 of those layers, and then going to right click and merge them, so then they're all one layer. When you have a small kind of gap like this, it doesn't matter too much if you just stretch it across. It's not going to matter a great deal, because you're not sort of stretching it too much, and on a texture like this you're not going to be able to tell anyway, so don't worry too much about it. Once again, I'm just going to go on to the rectangular marquee tool and just clear up any of the excess that's sort of overhanging this area just here. Okay. Next, I guess, would be the walls. So we're going to go with that's the decals, and we've got this just here. I thought I'd go for like a in fact, I'm not going to go for that one. I'm going to go find a painted wall, because I think when you start working with wallpaper, it does get quite confusing, especially when you're trying to line up all the different areas. That's going to be pretty tricky. Okay guys, so what I found was this sort of plaster wall texture, so I'm going to be using that. It is a seamless texture as well, so it should be able to fit pretty nicely in our environment. So this is going to actually go onto all of these panels just here. So if I hit Control V, we're going to apply that. Now we're going to stick to a rule here, because if we don't, then it's all going to be different scales on all the different walls. So we're going to say that let's see, we're going to have 2 in terms of height fitting on these panels. So if I zoom in, make sure it's just 1 pixel over. I'm wondering if 1 will be okay. Probably going to look a little bit too large, that texture there. So I'm just going to make 2 copies, so it doesn't actually matter what scale. We're going to roughly go, but a little bit bigger than halfway. We don't want to go too small, definitely. We want to go a little bit bigger. Press enter. Then we're going to hold Alt and we're going to drag it down. Once again, you've got that ugly little line again, so just press up on the keyboard and it should get rid of it for you. I'm going to merge those 2 layers, so merge them, they're both one. I'm then going to hit Control T, and I'm going to scale this down. Now this is where you're going to know that it's exactly 2 fitting into the height. So vertically on this room we've got 2 panels of this material. We're going to stick to that rule across every single one of our room walls, and that means that it's going to fit in, it's going to actually be the right scale. Else you'll find that if you just apply it, you're going to have slightly different scales of this material, and that always looks very fake and very wrong in a texture. Just going to go ahead and just make duplicates. Once again, I'm going to move it across one. Once I've done 2, it's quite easy then just to merge those 2 together, and then you can then just copy across the entire big panel. Don't worry too much about it going over the edge, because there's still a little line there. If you zoom in, there's still a little line there that I'm not quite happy with. Possibly just go over one more time, and that should do the trick. And then same here again, 1, 2. There we go. So just kind of cleaning that up as we go along. We're then going to merge those 3 layers together. So that's all one kind of panel now. Now with this I can copy it over to the top as well, because the scale is pretty much the same. So if I just zoom in, make sure we're 1 pixel over, just on both the sides. On the bottom as well, we're just 1 or 2 pixels too short, so I'm going to hit Control T, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to 1, 2. Okay, so we're 2 pixels now extra, therefore that's sort of going to fit perfectly now. And what I'm going to do now is I'm actually just going to get rid of the excess, the same as before, on each one of these layers. And then I'm going to be bringing that texture back in, so Control C, let's Control V, doing exactly the same on these ones. Okay. Now the reason why I'm doing it again, I'm bringing in the whole panel again, because if I tried to bring this in here, I'd have to scale it quite a bit. So if you see there's a big gap there, if I was trying to scale this, you're stretching the material, which means you're going to lose the quality of that material as well. So the better thing I probably could have done is actually started with the taller panels and then actually shrink it down onto the smaller ones, which would have been the best option, but it doesn't really matter too much. I can do this quick enough. Don't forget it's 2 panels down, so it's not just 1. We're going to be scaling this to just over halfway. Holding Alt, making a copy. Moving it up once just to get rid of that seam line. Merging both those layers. Make sure we've got the right layers merged, of course. So that's that one. That's that one. That's that one. So I don't know why that's there, but let's just select those 2. Now it does help sometimes to start naming your layers, so you can do that. So this one's floor, this one's ceiling. Oh, we don't want to select that one. Make sure you double click on the actual text itself. This is going to be 1 wall, 2 wall, 3 wall, but I'm just going to, for the sake of speed, I'm just going to leave that for now. So then I'm going to be scaling this down, again making sure it's just 1 pixel over. It is important that you go over by 1 pixel. If you don't, then you're going to find that you'll be able to see a gap in your textures on your walls, which is never a good thing. So then we're going to hit Alt, move that across, just go across twice. See if we can do it just 1 more time, twice, done. Okay, so we're done with that. I'm just going to merge those layers. So that panel's done. I'm going to hold Alt, I'm going to drag that down, and it should fit pretty perfectly with this area just here as well. Maybe just a tiny little bit, 1 pixel down, that's all it needs. That side's perfect. Now the only thing that we have left to do is these panels just here. Okay, so these 2 panels here are for the length, so that's going to be the longer areas on the very top and the bottom. So you've got this piece here and you got that piece there. And then these 2, the short ones, are these 2 just here. So I'm going to go ahead, and because these are the short ones, it doesn't actually matter too much for these panels in terms of texture, seaming. I mean, we can obviously adjust these things later, but for now I'm just going to select, let's say, this one, hold Alt, I'm just going to drag it across so it kind of fits over that area there, and then hold Alt just to do the same there. Once again, I'm just going to merge these two because pretty much the same texture, so there's no point having two separate layers for that. Let's just clean up all this excess that we don't need. There we go. Even here we're a little bit close, actually it's overlapping the floor, so I'm just going to get rid of that. Now one thing we need to do for this area here, these are the two horizontal panels. We need to actually go ahead, and when you make a copy of a layer, let's actually do it correctly, hold Alt, we actually need to rotate it. So I'm going to hit Control T, hold Shift, I'm going to rotate it by 90 degrees. The reason for that is because if we don't do that, then the sort of lines that are on the texture, this kind of painted lines that you can see, these kind of decay marks, they're going to be going across. So if you have a look in our 3D environment, because on the wall they're going to be going across this way, they should be also going across in the same. What's happened? Okay, right, we've just gone below it for some reason. Basically, because the lines are going across on the wall this way, we need them to do exactly the same thing on these panels just here. If they were going the opposite way, it wouldn't look right, would it? It would look terrible. So we're gonna, like I said, rotate that across, and we're just gonna fit that in there. That's gonna be fine, and then gonna get rid of the excess. There you go. And that pretty much is the texture sheet. Okay, so we're gonna leave the texture just like that for now, because I don't want to make the texturing process too long, but you can then bring in some other images and start overlaying stuff as well. So just as an example, I'm not going to do it because otherwise it just take a little while just to get this right. If we were to copy a decal like that, paste it over, try and line it up like so, maybe scale it down. You could then maybe go into your layer options or your layer styles just here. You can click on normal and just go down, press down on the arrow, and then you can see how it sort of blends in different ways. So you can really play around with how it looks and mess around with the different effects you can get. Okay, but I'm not going to do that right now because otherwise the tutorial is going to be very, very long. We don't want that. So I'm going to hide the background copy, which is these green lines and the white lines. We don't want those over our textures, so we're going to hide that layer. Hit Control S, and it's already in the right folder. I'm going to call this interior or reception room, or reception left, because that's the reception one. And we're going to call it diffuse because that's the diffuse texture. Okay, we're going to go back into here. We're then going to go and hit M for material editor. Go to our, well, let's go to a blank material, which is the second one. I'm going to name it exactly the same because obviously when you have a material, it's always good to name them, because otherwise when you take them into Unreal, they're going to have random. They're going to have basically 02 default as the name for the material, which is never a good thing again, because you want to be as clear as possible. So reception left material. The reason why I put material and don't leave it all the same, because Unreal doesn't like it when there's two different assets, whether they're textures, materials, or assets as in meshes, if they have the same name. So I just put a mat, not a map. Reception left mat for material. Okay, so that's going to work fine for that. We're then going to actually go and the easiest way to apply diffuse, okay, there's two ways. You can drag the texture. So if I just go into here, if I find the texture, which is this one just here, I can drag it into this little blank panel, this little box just next to diffuse, and that's going to bring in the diffuse. I say you can do that, it's not actually working. Why is it not working? Okay, so that's not doing it. So what we can do also is we can drag it into the diffuse color. So if you go down to maps, you can expand maps and then click and drag it into diffuse color. It's really weird why it's not working in here. It should, but for some reason it wants to be a pain. So we're just going to go down to maps and drag it into the diffuse color channel where it says none. Okay, so then that's in there. We can see it right there. So if we just go ahead and apply it now, so if you go onto this icon here to assign the material to selection, and then click on this one, which is to show shaded material in viewport, you'll be able to see that material in our viewport. Okay, so that's pretty much the texturing process done for the first stage anyway. If you find that the texture looks a little bit blurry in your viewport, don't worry, it's a bit of a problem with 3ds Max's default setup. If you go and if you basically select this little plus in the top left corner of your perspective view, go to configure viewports, you're going to go to display performance. It always downscales the textures to 512, so you can obviously go to 1024, you can even go to 2048, but don't forget that's going to have an impact on the performance of your viewport. So that's going to be quite a bit more crisper, but don't worry too much because we're going to be putting it in the engine, and that's why we want it to look its best. So we can see that we've got the floor. I'm going to actually get rid of this blueprint now because I don't need it. I'm just going to be working with what I've got. We've got the ceiling, we've got the floor, looks nice, we've got the walls as well, and if we just sort of look very carefully, if we can, not sure if you can see, but the sort of streaks are going across, so they kind of match the wall. If we did it the other way as before, then it would have looked terrible. Okay, so they all kind of match pretty nicely, and we can obviously tweak these things later anyway, but that's your first room textured. Okay, we could even go into this room here and we could apply it in there because it's just a duplicate, so the UV space is actually exactly the same, it's just back to front. Okay, so you'll notice that the material is sort of back to front there, but that's pretty much that room textured. Okay, don't worry too much about the errors on this area just here. As I mentioned when we were unwrapping it, we don't need to worry about those because we're actually going to be placing a door frame to cover that area anyway, so it's not anything that we need to be concerned about. So those are 2 rooms textured. I'm going to leave you guys, if you haven't already, to unwrap the hallway and to texture it yourselves. And then in the next tutorial I'm actually going to be running through how to get these rooms into Unreal and then how to add collision so you can actually walk around in them, and then we'll work on some advanced materials and textures to make these surfaces of the walls, floors and ceilings really pop and really starting to look AAA and next gen. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this tutorial, guys. It was more of a texturing tutorial, but anyway, I've tried to be as detailed and concise as I could. Please like this video, guys, if you've enjoyed what I've done, if you think it's useful, and please also, if you're new to the channel, please do subscribe. Lots more videos coming, and thanks again, guys, for watching. I'll catch you all next time.